Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Stan Pierre-Louis, the president and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association. Stan, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thank you. We're excited to talk about the power of games.
Absolutely, and games are very powerful. They can connect us, they can give us some productive energy, we can have a good time with them. Who's playing video games these days, by the way? It's not just young people these days.
Every year, the Entertainment Software Association conducts a study to understand the demographics, attitudes, and behaviors surrounding video games. This year, we found a lot of insights. Nearly 2/3 of Americans play video games, age 5 to 90. That's more than 205 million Americans, and it's split about evenly between men and women. But who's playing gets very interesting. Of the 205 million people playing video games, around 23% are under 18, but 28% are age 50 and older. So it's really amazing to see the growth of games, but how people continue to play at every stage of life.
Yeah, it's not just for kids. You say games, and maybe you think about kids, but it's not that at all. What's driving that trend among especially older Americans? What makes them want to play games?
Well, all people who play games want to have fun. And so first and foremost, if it's not fun, you're not going to play the game. People also look to it as a way to relax and to enjoy others' company. Connection's the biggest reason after that. People really enjoy playing with others at every demographic. And as you look at the older demographic, they also play to keep their mind sharp.
Okay. What kinds of games would help keep your mind sharp? Is there a specific genre or a specific type of game that would really help someone with that particular goal of keeping your mind sharper?
Well, most people like to play games that they gravitate towards, and every demographic has a series of games that works more than others for that demographic. Mm-hmm. With older gamers, you find that puzzle games are a great way to keep your mind sharp, and also games that people may have traditionally played as board games that have become video games, particularly during the pandemic. They found that it was a great way to play those games and as a way to stay connected to others. And we're finding that within those older generations, and I'm unfortunately becoming one of them very quickly, people continue to play those different kinds of games. One of the most famous gamers in the world is Pope Leo XIV.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
That's right. He plays Wordle and Words with Friends with his brother every day as a way to escape the daily news cycle, but also as a way to stay connected.
Amazing. So we mentioned that it can really help you stay connected, and you specifically mentioned COVID. And that really stands out to me. When COVID happened, I was able to keep in touch with my friends by playing games, by playing PlayStation. We were talking all the time, playing games. Without that, COVID would have been a much more isolated time for me personally, and I'm sure for millions of other people who were playing games at that point. I think that's a really good example on how to highlight just how these types of video games can keep people connected. It doesn't matter if you live in a different part of the world. You can stay connected.
That's exactly right. And more people are staying connected and meeting others through video games. Around 55% of people play games with others. Mm-hmm. And it's a way of them expressing that joy and doing it in an environment where others get to enjoy it with them.
How about like family life? What role do video games play in family life, parenting? Does it make it harder for parents to be good parents if there are games around all the time, or does it actually bring families closer together? How do you manage that dynamic when there are games, families, parenting, that sort of thing? About
70% of parents play video games, and that's more than the general population of adults, which is about 60%. And 82% of those parents play with their kids because what they find is that it's a great way to connect with the kids. It's a great way to find out what the kids are doing, and it's a great way to understand what's next and what's coming next.
Okay. Sometimes when parents get involved with activities that their kids are involved with, it becomes uncool automatically. But that's not the case with video games often, I guess, right?
Well, one of the things that parents have learned is that there are a lot of safeguards around video game play for them to use. Mm-hmm. There are guidelines about age ratings, around what's in the game, and parental controls around games that the video game ecosystem provides. So more and more parents are relying on that information. About 78% of parents are aware of what they call the ESRB ratings. That's the Entertainment Software Rating Board. And they come up with E for everyone, T for teen, all of those ratings. And about 82% of parents actually use parental controls in some way, shape, or form to manage gameplay, time spent, money spent. And so with all of those guardrails around it, makes it much more enjoyable for parents to have control of what's happening, but still get to enjoy that gameplay with their kids.
And a lot of that stuff you just said, there are obviously concerns about online activity, being a parent. It's really tough. You have kids who are on social media. You don't necessarily know what they're looking at, who they're talking to. But it sounds like, based on what you just said with video games and other things like that, just gaming in general, you can have a lot more control, a lot more safeguards, like you said, over what your kids may or may not be able to do, right?
Yeah, 70% of parents say they'd prefer their kids to play video games than be on social media.
Wow.
And that's based on that experience they've had in understanding what those guardrails are and the joy it brings to families.
And how about accessibility? We all have a phone in our pockets now, and you mentioned Wordle. I mean, that's not a very complicated game. Anybody can play Wordle. You just have to have a mobile device, really, and you can play games these days. How has accessibility changed the way we all have access to games and we all play games?
More and more people are playing on multiple devices. The number one device that people play on is the mobile device because it is so accessible, easy to get games onto, and easy to play those games oftentimes. Not always, but oftentimes. They also love playing on consoles, on PCs, and on virtual reality headsets. So more and more there are different ways to play and different games made for each of those devices to keep them exciting and keep consumers interested.
Technology is always changing too. You mentioned virtual reality. Are we at a point now where that's going to become mainstream, commonplace, where maybe you just go to someone's house and they have a virtual reality set right there? Sometimes you do see them, but it's not often necessarily that you see people with virtual reality headsets and things like that. Is the technology evolving quickly with that, or are we at a time where that's still going to be far down the future when people actually have physically, on a mainstream basis, something on your head and you're in that world? What do you think about that?
Today, more people are playing on mobile consoles and PCs than on virtual reality headsets, and a lot more development is going into those top three mechanisms. That said, a lot of developers are looking for ways of creating exciting opportunities for players on VR sets, and you're seeing more and more hardware manufacturers looking for ways to reach consumers in innovative ways.
You've said that there's a game for everybody, basically, right? Even the Pope. If you want to play puzzle games, sports games, if you want to build things, you can do so many things in games. How does someone find the particular game that's right for them? How do they seek that out? How do you find the game that's really going to fit your interests? If you have advice for someone who's looking around for a game, maybe they hear you talking about games, they get excited. How do you, because there's so many games out there, right? I mean, you look at the PlayStation catalog or whatever, and it's just, you could scroll all day and you could just see games all day. How do you pick the one that's right for you, the one that fits what you want to do?
First, for parents and families, we encourage them to use the ESRB guidelines, which they can find on esrb.org, to understand what kinds of games are age appropriate for their kids and their families. That helps really fine-tune what the selections are for families. I think for others, it really comes down to their interests. What we're finding is more and more people are starting to play games that mimic their real-life interests. Today, 56% of adults who play sports play a video game version of that sport.
Right.
And 83% of them say it makes their playing better. It increases their performance. And so you're finding that sometimes a gravitational pull is involved in a real-life experience, but then there are also fantasy games, action games, role-play games that really attract lots of users in different ways.
So if someone's a basketball player, I've seen LeBron James and other really famous basketball players playing NBA 2K, right? What is it about games like that that could actually benefit you in real life? Is it just the game is so good, it's made in such a way that it mimics real life in a beneficial way? What is it about the game that makes it actually so good and so effective that someone could actually use it to improve their real life skills?
One of the great things about these games is they're made with so much realism that they let you experience the game without being on the field. They have strategy around it, so if you're playing NFL Madden, you have a playbook and understand it. So even professional athletes are benefiting from playing these games because they're able to see the game from a different perspective. You have professional quarterbacks using VR headsets to see plays, and you have car racers using video games as a way of understanding courses better.
Amazing. So it's like a simulation. It's even goes beyond a game a little bit. It's more like a simulation of a real life thing. And then once you get out of the game, maybe you see something, like as a football player, maybe you remember a play that you ran on the video game and it triggers something in your head. Hey, let's try this. It worked on this simulation, right? And maybe it'll work in the real world too.
And with that simulation comes competition. Oftentimes you'll see players playing against other players, even at the highest levels. These athletes are competitive on everything that they do, and it doesn't change because they're playing video games.
How about the mental and emotional impact of video games? Not everybody does well with a lot of screen time, so how about just generally speaking, how would you say that a lot of video games would impact someone's mental and emotional, really their headspace, right? Because you don't want to overdo it, right? How do you avoid overdoing it while still getting those benefits that we mentioned?
One of the things we found in this year's survey is that more and more players are seeing video games as a great outlet. Yes, they play because it's fun. They also find that it helps them relax. And increasingly they find that it helps them with mental stimulation as well as stress relief. There have been studies around this by academics who see that games actually make kids less stressed. And so video games are an outlet that are very different than other screens.
Do you think video games have changed over the years as far as just their application? You're talking about an outlet and how they can really increase your faculties. They can keep your faculties sharp as you get older. Have they really changed over the years? It used to be basically geared toward kids mostly, right? Like back in, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it really was geared more toward kids.
I think what we've seen is people have continued to play throughout their lives. Today, the average age of a player is 36 years old. And that's reflected in the fact that you have more people playing over 50 than you do under 18. So games have adapted over time to meet all those audiences. There's also been a lot of opportunities for different kinds of game makers to make new games that reach different audiences. And so you can be a kid, you can be an older player, or you can be a millennial or a Gen Zer, and there's a game for you that keeps you stimulated and excited about what's coming next.
What do you think is coming next as far as new consoles or new ways to play games? Talking about the recent past with technology and electronics, you look at a flat screen TV, right? Like 25 years ago, a flat screen TV, what, it would be like $5,000 or something. Now you can go to Target and get one for, what, $700. And video games are still on consoles, but they're rapidly evolving. What do you think is going to be the near future? What is the next step in video games? Not necessarily a controller in your hand, maybe not even necessarily something on your face like a VR headset. Like, what in your mind is the next stage for the way people play video games?
At the core of every game is a great story. And if you don't have that, then you don't have a great game. And so what's always going to happen is being able to create that story. I think we've also seen the increase of technology in making games and making them more photorealistic and creating new worlds for people to enjoy. And now what we're beginning to see is how are companies using AI to help speed up the process of making games while keeping human developers at the center of that content. I think that's what we're going to see in the future is how do you make games more personalized so that people can enjoy and engage in games in ways that they've never had before.
Some of these worlds in games, you mentioned creating a world, they're so big that it's difficult to get your head around it. You look at, there was a Harry Potter game that came out, I think last year, and I saw it, and it was like the biggest world. You could walk your character through the world, and it would take you, I don't know, several weeks to get across the entire map. So how do these worlds get built like this? It's just got to be such a thing that most people don't even understand, and then you sit down and you play through it and you're just immersed in it. You don't necessarily need to understand how it happens.
Well, one of the great things about video games is they give consumers more value than any other entertainment product because you can play lots of iterations of games, and as different versions of the games get updated, it provides even new opportunities to engage for players. 3 to 5 years can go into making some of the big blockbuster titles, and that's to make sure that players have a lot of fun playing, but also find the intrigue and can connect with others. And so I think what you'll begin to see is more immersive content being created, but all keeping players at the center of the project.
Amazing. All right, Stan, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is Stan Pierre-Louis, the president and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association. You're watching the discussion Game On, Essential Facts About Video Games. I'm Nick Iannelli, and for more on this discussion, visit WTOP.com and search Entertainment Software Association.